Okay, the next thing we're going to add is something that allows us to change the player characteristics. And that's what these 10 little player icons are waiting in the wings for. So the idea is that when we click on one of those icons, we'll get this little panel coming up, which will allow us to enter a name for the player, but more importantly, to start changing how good their aim is and what sort of error they've got when on distance when they play a shot. And then when we submit that, it should save the information. So when we go back to it, go back to number 3, then the information is there. And when we play a shot, so if we should take that into account. So let's do an extreme case. Let's make the aim error several degrees, and we'll just play a shot with the normal player first. So this is a player with a small amount of error on them, and you play the shot, and you can see it hasn't gone right to the target like it used to, because there's this small error on the shot each time. If we activate number 3, which is the one with a big error on it, and play the shot, then, well, wouldn't you know it, the aim error is okay, because of course it is random within certain limits, but they've hit the ball a bit shorter. Let's try another shot with number 3, and this time the aim is sort of way off, and they've hit it too hard as well. So that's what we're accomplishing with this functionality, the ability to make each player a little bit different in terms of the quality of their play. Now, clearly, when we click this button here, we're activating a panel which is normally not active. So as soon as I click the number 7 here, this player panel becomes active, and there's an input field and a couple of sliders and a button. And this little close button here, that just gets rid of the panel that was activated. So the first thing we need to do is in the ball script, we need to add some characteristics. So we've added a float for angle error, one for distance error, and one for the player name. And at the start, we define the angle error and the distance error to be 1, so 1% error. 1% is about 1 degree, this is in degrees and this is in centimeters per meter. So this is in percent, this is in degrees. So 1 degree is a pretty good player. Anyone who keeps their shots within 1 degree, plus or minus, is very good. By the time you get to an average club player, it might be more like 3 or 4. Distance error, well, you can work that out for yourself. Most people are capable of hitting within a meter of a shot that's 20 meters away, so about 5% is a reasonable distance error to put in. So those are the only changes that we need to make for the ball. The main thing is the player characteristics. So when we click the player button, we're going to activate the player panel. So this is the game object that's the panel, and this is the title of the panel. This is the one that says player 1, player 2, player 3. So when we click the button, we're going to show the player panel, and we're going to fix the title of that according to which ball it is. And then what we do is we set the value of a game object, ball object, to be the ball number that we want. So the ball number as chosen from the integer that's passed in with reference to the list of balls that was created on setup. We color the panel so that it's either red or white. Actually, red's a bit severe, so we just go for a sort of pinky color if it's a red ball. And then we harvest the current values of the angle, the distance, and the player name, and bring them in to the to the um, to the fields on in this script. And in fact, where we're taking them is to the value of the sliders. So those two sliders that we have there. And once we have those values, we can actually update the 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 text that's associated with the slider, and that will give a sort of uh, text-based output to tell us what the value of the slider is. We can obviously change the position of the slider, and every time we do, it will update these two little functions here, because these functions are linked to the sliders, as we'll see in a moment. And when we press the submit button, then we start sending things the other way. We send things to the ball script from this player characteristic script, from the slider, essentially. So, as let's go to player, say, number 10. As I change the position of this slider, it's changing the text value that is on there, um, and that is happening because as we change the slider, it's calling these little functions here. As soon as I press the submit button, then those values are stored in ball number 10. So how do we actually then make the shots vary according to the errors? Well, that all happens in the stroke manager, and all it requires is us putting in two little blocks of code in the fixed update. The first is to apply the player distance error. So currently, when we're working out how much force to put on the ball, we work out the distance between the target and the striker. We can now apply an error to that. We can say, well, the distance error is 5 in 100, so therefore make the total distance either a bit more or a bit less randomly within that range. So you create a random number, and for 5%, it's going to be anything between 1 and 5, 0.01 to 0.0 to 0.05. And then we would just multiply our total distance by that error factor. And then we do the same thing with the angle. We go and find the worst angle that the player can miss by from the angle error associated with their ball, and then we choose a number um, between the highest positive amount of that and the lowest negative amount of that, come up with a random error, and adjust the angle of the vector that's going to be applied to the force according to that random error. So actually implementing this in the fixed update script after strike has been triggered is really quite straightforward. It's just applying an error to the distance and applying an error to the angle. So that's all that is required. We can now play shots, which are, if we play the shot with number 10 now, and we can see there some error has been applied. 10 is not going to the target as well. If we were to make 10 0 error on both, and then play a shot, then we get something that's pretty much perfect. So you can play perfectly, you can play imperfectly. Now there is a better way of doing the error, because at the moment all I'm doing is saying the error is 5%, so the shot can have an error of anything between -5 and +5, and it'll just be a single random number on that continuum. In reality, we play our shots within as a normal distribution. You know, it's not completely random. We cluster our shots around the mean in a way that fits a statistical distribution. And later in another future sort of video, I'll show how a more sophisticated uh, implementation of randomization can occur. But that will do for now to get some uh, difference between our players, to control that. And obviously you can think of other player attributes that you could add. So when we, for example, start doing sparks, you might think that people might be better or worse at doing sparks than they are single ball shots.